Section 3. You will hear a conversation between the Professor, Sandra and Mike. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 30. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 30. Good morning. Now, this term we've looked at various aspects of recruitment, and you can now see how much more there is to it than just putting applicants through a short interview or reading CVs. Now, today's tutorial is just to recap some of the main points regarding recruitment. I'd like you to imagine that you are managers, and we will discuss how different applicants would fit into the team or group they have to work with. We'll look at some examples later. You can select someone, even a friend, who has all the right qualifications. Then you can also check that they have a lot of experience, that they've done the sort of tasks that you want them to do in your company.
But you need to know if they have the right character, don't you?
Precisely, Sandra. If they start work and you realize that they just don't get along with everybody else, you've got a problem? Exactly, Mike, exactly. They might have contrasting views on how to do something. They might not be able to get on with other members of your team.
Even adding one person to a team can change the whole group dynamic, can't it?
Absolutely. This could be particularly true with someone who is particularly outgoing or outspoken.
Could company training reduce the possibility of this happening?
Possibly, but company training tends to show new people how you do something at a particular company, rather than changing a person's character to suit your company. There's also the question of ability. Particularly in a team situation, people have to believe in each other's ability to do the tasks the boss has given. They have to trust that everyone will do their part of the job.
Right, but trying to find out what someone's personality is in a job interview is it possible? I mean, you won't find out what they're really like until they actually start work.
Well, is there any value in asking candidates questions about their hobbies, for example?
I doubt it. What could that tell you?
I don't know. It could tell you something about their personality, whether they're outgoing, for example. Most people involved in recruitment would argue that it does tell you something. More and more employers around the world are making use of personality questionnaires to help them select new staff. Yes, you mentioned those in the last lecture. Do they work? Well, most employers use them, but there is concern that they do not reveal the applicant's true personality.
Yeah, some people might just write the answers that they think the employer wants.
That's true. Very often, employers can weed out the applicants who do that by asking more detailed questions during the interview. The fact that they have been used for so long and that they are so widely used makes me think that there must be something in them. Well,
I'm not so sure. Just because they're used a lot, that doesn't automatically mean that they are useful or worthwhile.
True, but these tests have been created by experts, and they believe that the answers can provide indicators as to roughly the type of person that the applicant is.
How about the idea of setting problems for applicants and seeing how they approach them?
I like that idea, but the problems need to be simple, since there's not much time to prepare a full answer. In addition, the applicant doesn't have much background knowledge of the way that the company does things.
It's a good idea, but may not always be practical. Usually it is, though.
I'll need convincing. Let's move on to take a look at... That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
In a moment, you are going to hear a conversation between Dr. William and his students. Joe, and Angela about their local history project. As you listen, answer questions 21 to 30. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now, listen carefully to the conversation between Dr. William and his students and answer questions 21 to 26. Section 3. Hello, Joe, Angela.
Hello?
Hi. So, how's the local history project going? Are you making good progress?
Yes and no.
Oh? Well, we anticipated problems of various kinds. None of the group has much experience of collaborating on projects, but we spent some time on discussing how to go about it, and thrashed out what seemed a useful approach. But it seems that Angela and I are the only ones actually following the plan. That meant that the whole project has been lacking coordination, so we've fallen behind our schedule. I see. That's tricky.
Yes, it is. We felt that the targets had been defined, so we'd all know what to deal with. But looking back, we probably should have really specified individual responsibilities. As it is, we only have a loose sense of what should be done by whom.
Well, this is quite a common problem, actually. I take it that you've had enough group meetings, and you're looking for an effective solution. I think you'd better go to the resource centre, and you will find the advice service they provide there helpful at this point.
Thanks. We'll go there later.
On a specific note, I think we got carried away with recruiting people to interview at the expense of building up the reference section, which I don't think is going to be solid enough. Do you think that will be a major problem? I'd have to see how much there is to be sure. But, well, you'll have to be pragmatic at this point, I think. What you'd better do is to ensure your methodology is really strong, so at least you can't be faulted on that front. Then, if people challenge your results, at least you would have carefully reported on how you reached them. Do you see what I mean?
Yes?
So?
Yes, I think one resource that we haven't exploited fully enough is the internet. I've gone through a lot of journals in the closed reserve of the library, but actually, there are websites where you can call up lists of approaches or data sets really quickly.
I think that's a good idea. Before the tourist gets further information, you will have another chance to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen to the rest of the conversation and answer questions 27 to 30. Now, let's think about the field trip, and at least make sure that it goes as well. You're going to Cambridge on the 23rd?
The Wednesday, yes.
And on day 1, you'll take the morning flight and then get settled into the hotel.
Uh-huh.
But you need to get down to work after lunch, of course. Now, I've arranged for you to have a look at some useful visual materials, especially photographs, old magazines, and newspapers, which are in an exhibition called History in Pictures in Fitzwilliam Museum. That sounds like a good starting point.
I went to the Darwin exhibit at the Fitzwilliam Museum at Cambridge last year. It was absolutely inspiring. It couldn't be better. The staff was very professional, and the exhibit was brilliantly presented.
Yes, indeed. There are quite a lot on show, so that'll occupy most of the afternoon. Then, the following morning, I want you to go and talk to Christopher Andrew, the history professor of Cambridge University. Of course, don't forget to take a tape recorder with you so that you can replay and recall with perfect clarity what was said later on.
And make sure to have our questions ready.
Indeed. Okay. And the afternoon is free for you to wander around, get the feel of the place, and soak up the atmosphere. Do some sightseeing. As you wish. It's a beautiful city. But it's back to work on Friday morning. Walk around the central area. You know, Trinity Street, Market Square, Great St. Mary's Church. I'm getting maps ready for you from different periods, and your task is to compare those with the makeup of the city today. Make notes on how the city has changed over time. You know, what's grown up, what's gone, that sort of thing.
That sounds so interesting. I hope the weather's good.
Yes. And in the afternoon, I want you to think about producing your own records. Follow the format of the ones in the City Library archives. The history of the castle is an indispensable part of the city's development. So don't forget to take a digital camera with you and get some nice pictures. Try your best to reflect the relation between the buildings and the surroundings. We'll do our best. And when will we travel back? That's up to you. You can either... That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. In a moment, you are going to hear a conversation about the hydrologic cycle. As you listen, answer questions 21 to 26. First, you will have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now, listen carefully to the conversation and answer questions 21 to 26. Section 3. Water is essential for life, and in parts of the world, it's a precious commodity. The distribution of water, however, is quite varied. Many locations have plenty of it, while others have very little. Water exists on Earth as a solid, liquid, or gas. Oceans, rivers, clouds, and rain, all of which contain water, are in a frequent state of change. Surface water evaporates, cloud water precipitates, rainfall infiltrates the ground, etc. However, the total amount of the Earth's water does not change. The circulation and conservation of Earth's water is called the hydrologic cycle. Balances the amount of water in the ocean, in the atmosphere, and on the land. We get our understanding of how the cycle operates from research in climatology and hydrology. So, who can tell me what climatology is? It's the study of climate and, The causes and effects of different climates. That's right. And what is hydrology, Sarah?
Well, hydro means water, so it's something to do with water, like the study of water.
Yes. The prefix hydro does refer to water. The hydrologic cycle is the water cycle, and hydrology is the study of the water, the distribution and effect of the water on the Earth's surface and in the soil and layers of rock. Think of climatology as the atmospheric phase, and hydrology as the land phase of the water cycle. Climatologists study the role of solar energy in the cycle. They're mainly concerned with the atmospheric phase of the cycle, how solar energy drives the cycle through the processes of evaporation, atmospheric circulation, and precipitation. Water is continuously absorbed into the atmosphere as vapor, evaporation. Then, water vapor is transported through the atmosphere, atmospheric circulation, and returns to the earth as rain, hail, or snow, precipitation. The amount of water evaporating from oceans exceeds precipitation over oceans, and excess water vapor is moved by wind to the land.
What about the land phase?
The land phase of the cycle is the concern of hydrologists. Hydrologists study the vast quantities of water in the land phase of the cycle, how water moves over and through the land, and how it's stored on or within the earth. Of the overland surfaces of the precipitation that falls over land, small amounts evaporate while still in the air, and re-enter the atmosphere directly. The rest of it reaches the surface of the land. The water that falls to earth is stored on the surface of lakes, or it penetrates the surface, or it runs off over the surface and flows in rivers to the ocean. Some of the water is stored temporarily in the upper soil layers and used later by trees and plants. When it rains, yes?
So the transfer of land water to the oceans is called runoff, right?
Exactly. Runoff is the movement of land water to the oceans, chiefly in the form of rivers, lakes, and streams. Runoff consists of precipitation that neither evaporates, transpires, nor penetrates the surface to become groundwater. Even the smallest streams are connected to larger rivers that carry billions of gallons of water into oceans worldwide. Before the talk goes on, you will have 10 seconds to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen to the rest of the talk and answer questions 27 to 30. I wondered if that makes trees and plants part of the hydrologic cycle. I mean, they take in water, and the water moves through them, and then later on, the water evaporates from their leaves. I'm glad you mentioned that, John. Plants do play an important role in the land phase of the cycle and are therefore part of the cycle. Trees and plants circulate and store water. They draw it up through their roots and return it to the atmosphere through their leaves during evapotranspiration. When it rains, if the soil is already saturated, water will seep downward through the upper soil layers and possibly reach the water table. When it reaches the water table, it passes into groundwater storage. most of the groundwater later returned to the surface, either as springs or as stream flow, supplying water to plants. Eventually, all of the water falling on land makes its way back to the ocean. The movement of water from land to the ocean is called runoff. Runoff and groundwater together balance the amount of water that moves from the ocean to the land. Every molecule of water in the natural system eventually circulates through the hydrologic cycle. Tremendous quantities of water are cycled annually, and, as John pointed out, living organisms, plants and animals as well, are also part of the cycle. Since water is a large part of the mass of most organisms, living organisms store and use water, since water is the solvent for most biological reactions. That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. In a moment, you are going to hear a conversation between a professor and his student Alicia. As you listen, answer questions 21 to 30. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 30. Now, listen carefully to the conversation and answer questions 21 to 30. Section 3. Until recently, we knew almost nothing about how important bees are in maintaining natural diversity. Now we know more about them. We know, for example, that bees fall into two categories: wild bees and domesticated honeybees. A main reason for the domestication of bees has always been the production of honey and beeswax. We also know that honeybees are the dominant pollinators. In addition to bees, wasps, moths, butterflies, flies and beetles, as many as 1,500 species of bird and mammals serve as pollinators. Many crops of commercial importance, such as almond, cherry, avocado pear, watermelon, cucumber, rely on pollination by insects. And of these insects, bees are by far the most important. Animals and insects provide pollination services for over 3/4 of the stable crop plants, and for 80% of all flowering plants in the world. The economic value of animal pollinators to world agriculture has been estimated to be $200 billion per year. Pollination is one of nature's services to farmers, so think about this. If you eliminated the pollinators, it would take the food right out of our mouths. We biologists never imagined we'd see the day when wild plants or crops suffered from pollinator scarcity. But, unfortunately, that day has come. In fact, farmers in Mexico and the US are suffering the worst pollinator crisis in history. So, What happened? Any ideas? Alicia?
It is, because of natural enemies? I read something about a kind of parasite that's killed lots of bees.
It's true. An outbreak of parasitic mites has caused a steep decline in North American populations of honeybees. But parasites aren't the only factor.
What about the pesticides used on farms? All those chemicals must have an effect.
Most definitely, yes. Pesticides are a major factor. Both wild and domesticated bees are in serious trouble because of pesticides. In California, farm chemicals are killing around 10% of all the honeybee colonies. Agriculture in general is part of the problem. Another example is the monarch butterfly. Millions of monarchs from all over the US and southern Canada fly south every year in late summer. The monarch is the only butterfly that returns to a specific site year after year. Unfortunately, the herbicides used in the milkweed in the Great Plains are taking a toll on monarchs, and fewer of them are reaching their winter grounds in Mexico. In a recent field study at Cornell University in the US, it was found that monarch butterfly caterpillars eating corn-toxic pollen blown onto milkweed plants near cornfields had suffered significant adverse effects, leading to death of nearly 20% of the caterpillars.
Wow, 20%! That's so tragic.
And it's more than that. There are over 1,500 species of butterflies in the Indian subcontinent, but their population is dwindling because of environmental changes. Many man-made environmental changes like deforestation, extension of farming, and unrestricted urbanization are threatening some species of butterflies to extinction by destruction or disturbance of their larval as well as adult food plants, feeding grounds, and shelters. Many of the most spectacular and endangered species have various levels of protection under local legislation. However, there is a major trade in the spectacular tropical species for incorporation in ornaments and souvenirs. The international demand for insects is greater than most people realize.
Yes, indeed. I once read an article about another important pollinator, the long-nosed bat. These amazing animals feed on cactus flowers, but they are having a tough time too. Some desert ranchers mistake them for vampire bats, and they've tried to poison them or dynamite the caves where they roost.
Yes, we must recognize that pollination is not a free service, and that investment and stewardship are required to protect and sustain it. So what can be done about this situation?
Well, wildlife farming, based on sustainable exploiting wild creatures, can help to save endangered species like butterflies and their habitats. Besides, gardeners, orchard growers, farmers, and urban dwellers can switch to more pollinator-friendly organic methods of cultivation to reduce wildlife exposures to insecticides, herbicides, and fungicides.
That's right. Actually, the focus on beekeeping needs to change from conventional honey production to crop pollination. That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. In a moment, you are going to hear a conversation between two students talking about Art Deco and Art Moderne. As you listen, answer questions 21 to 30. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 30. Now, listen carefully to the conversation and answer questions 21 to 30. Section 3.
Our design class is really interesting, don't you think so?
Yeah, I like Professor Vargas, but sometimes he goes too fast, and I feel like I'm missing something. There's a lot we have to remember.
True. There are a lot of details about all the different styles.
Yeah, there are Art Nouveau and Art Deco and Art Moderne. I have a hard time keeping it all straight.
I know what you mean.
For example, it seems to me that Art Deco and Art Moderne are the same things.
Well, there is some overlap. They were both popular in the 1930s, although Art Deco came a little before modern. I think Professor Vargas said Art Deco started at an exhibition in Paris in 1925. Let me check out my notes. Right. Art Deco was a popular international art design movement from 1925 until the 1940s, affecting the decorative arts such as architecture, interior design, and industrial design, as well as the visual arts such as fashion, painting, the graphic arts, and film. At the time, this style was seen as elegant, glamorous, functional, and modern. Both Art Deco and its cousin, Art Moderne, were rarely used for houses. They were more common for commercial buildings and skyscrapers, and occasional institutional buildings.
So, they were about the same time. That's one thing that gets confusing. Another thing is, they seem so similar that it's hard to see why they're considered different styles.
Art Deco has more decoration than Art Moderne. Art Deco is the style you see in a lot of movie theaters and hotels that were built in the 20s and 30s. It has facades with geometric designs, including zigzags, chevrons, and strips of windows with decorative spandrels. And it's polychromy, often with vivid colors. Art Deco uses a lot of straight lines and slender forms. Sleekness is the word that comes to mind. Art Deco is often used in towers and other vertical projections, presenting a vertical emphasis. At the time, it was considered modernistic.
But that's what gets confusing. Doesn't modernistic also apply to Art Moderne?
Art Moderne is simpler than Deco. Art Moderne style buildings are similar to Art Deco in appearance, but are even more austere and functional. It has things like more rounded corners, flat roofs, and the walls are smooth and don't have any decoration. It's more streamlined than Deco. Art Moderne buildings remind me of boats. The walls are smooth, and the trim is usually stainless steel. A lot of the windows are round, kind of like the portholes on a boat. Architects gave Art Moderne buildings a strong horizontal emphasis, often accented by horizontal banding or streamlining.
Ah, I know a building like that. It's near here in town, on 2nd Avenue. It has a rounded corner and round windows. It used to be a gas station, but now it's a restaurant. We should go there sometime.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. My favorite building is the Maritime Building. It's downtown, right across from my father's office. It's Art Deco, built in 1927, and I'd tell that from the cornerstone. You should see the lobby. It's just beautiful. There's a geometric pattern in the tile on the floor, kind of a big circle with lots of triangles. And you should see the elevator doors. They're gorgeous.
You know, we should go around and look at some of these buildings.
Yeah, that would be fun.
And, you know what else? This is an idea for our project. We could take pictures of the buildings and do a slideshow in class.
Oh, that's a cool idea. But don't we need to get permission to take photographs? Especially of the interior. We need pictures of the lobby of the Maritime Building.
We could ask for permission. That shouldn't be a problem. Let's talk to Professor Vargas and see what he thinks.
Okay, why don't you do that? I'll go down to the Maritime Building and see if there's anyone there, like a building superintendent, who can give us permission. I'll let you know. Why don't we meet again on Thursday?
Okay, fine with me. That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.